Before dinosaurs, before even the forests we know, Earth was ruled by creatures so alien that if you saw them today, you might think you had landed on another planet. It was a world of shallow seas and strange light, of armor-plated predators and soft-bodied wanderers, of forms that would appear and vanish without ever being seen again. This was the age before reptiles, before mammals, before anything resembling the familiar. It was the dawn of animal life, and the rules of evolution were still being written. If we could travel back more than 500 million years, we would see an Earth almost unrecognizable. The continents were bare rock, streaked with dust and minerals. There was no grass, no trees, no birds or mammals. The air would sting your lungs, oxygen was still rare, and the sky carried a reddish hue from volcanic gases. Life thrived almost entirely in the oceans, which shimmered with warmth and mystery. These seas were shallow, rich in nutrients, and filled with creatures unlike anything living today. The Cambrian period marked the explosion of life as we understand it, when complex animals appeared seemingly all at once. It was as if evolution had thrown open every door and let imagination run wild. The oceans teemed with creatures that defied logic, beings with fins that looked like feathers, eyes mounted on stalks, and armor shaped like geometric sculptures. They came in every shape and size, filling every possible niche in the ecosystem. Among these early creatures was Anomalocaris, whose name means strange shrimp. It was anything but ordinary. At nearly 3 feet long, it was a giant in its time, gliding through the water with rippling flaps along its sides. Its head bore 2 long, grasping appendages lined with spikes, perfect for seizing soft-bodied prey. Its circular mouth, ringed with hard plates, opened and closed like a camera shutter, shredding whatever it captured. It was the top predator of its world, a creature so advanced that for decades scientists mistook its parts for separate animals. When its fossils were first found, one section that looked like a shrimp, another like a jellyfish, it was considered a mystery. Only later did paleontologists realize that these pieces belonged to one of the earliest true hunters in Earth's history. Yet Anomalocaris was not alone in its strangeness. The seas of the Cambrian were filled with marvels and monstrosities. Some floated aimlessly like living balloons, translucent and fragile. Others crept along the seafloor, covered in spikes or shells. Trilobites scuttled across the ocean bottom in endless numbers, their jointed exoskeletons gleaming under filtered light. They were the beetles of their age, endlessly adaptable, surviving for hundreds of millions of years. Their fossils remain among the most abundant on the planet, a reminder of a time when the ocean floor moved with their slow procession. There were also the bizarre hallucigenia, a creature so strange it took scientists decades to even figure out which way it faced. It had a worm-like body with 2 rows of spines on its back and tiny legs underneath. Early reconstructions showed it crawling on its spikes, its face upside down. Only with the discovery of better fossils did researchers realize it walked on soft limbs, its head bearing a circular mouth and simple eyes. It looked like something imagined in a dream, an experiment in motion and defense. Not far from hallucigenia moved Opabenia, another wonder of the Cambrian seas. It had 5 eyes on stalks, and a long, flexible trunk tipped with a claw. It used this appendage to grab food and place it in its small, backward-facing mouth. Nothing like it exists today. When its fossil was first shown to scientists, they reportedly laughed aloud at the absurdity of its form until they realized it was real. The Cambrian seas were an alien frontier. Light shimmered through water thick with plankton, illuminating forests of sponge-like organisms rising from the seabed. Jellyfish drifted silently in the currents. Worms bored through sediment, leaving intricate trails behind. Every direction held motion and color. The predators and prey of this age were inventing the first ecosystems, and evolution was working at full speed. But this world did not last forever. After tens of millions of years, climates shifted and new eras began. The Ordovician period followed, and with it came new life and new challenges. The seas deepened, reefs grew larger, and jawless fish, the earliest vertebrates, appeared. These fish were strange tube-like beings with bony armor around their heads, gliding through the water like armored submarines. They had no jaws, only circular mouths for sucking in particles. Above the waterline, the land was still barren. Wind blew dust across empty continents, carving shapes into rock. But along the shorelines, something was stirring. The first green algae and moss-like plants began to cling to damp stones. Tiny spores drifted through the air, marking the first steps toward life on land. For now, however, The oceans remained the center of the story. Then came the Silurian and Devonian periods, when the oceans filled with new predators and prey. Fish developed jaws for the first time, changing everything. The seas became hunting grounds filled with pursuit and escape. Sharks appeared in their earliest forms, sleek, fast, and efficient even in their youth. The coral reefs of the time stretched for hundreds of miles, alive with color and movement. Sea scorpions the size of crocodiles patrolled the shallows, their tails poised to strike. These monsters, called eurypterids, were among the largest arthropods ever to live. Their segmented bodies shimmered under sunlight as they prowled for prey along the ancient coasts. It was also during this age that plants took their first real foothold on land. Small forests of club mosses and ferns began to grow along rivers and swamps. Their roots stabilized the soil, and their leaves exhaled oxygen, changing the atmosphere forever. With oxygen came new possibilities. Insects and amphibians emerged to exploit this new frontier. Evolution was slowly building the bridge between sea and land. If you walked through one of those early forests, you would find the ground soft and spongy underfoot. The air would be damp, heavy with mist. Primitive ferns rose waist-high, and small arthropods crawled across the moss. Some were tiny, others palm-sized. Every movement would seem foreign creatures flickering between shapes familiar and utterly alien. The earth was still experimenting. Among the strangest inhabitants of this changing world were the placoderms, the armored fish of the Devonian seas. Some were small, but others, like Dunkleosteus, grew to lengths of 30 feet. With massive jaws lined with blade-like plates instead of teeth, they were unmatched predators. When they attacked, their jaws could slam shut with force strong enough to crush bone. They hunted everything from smaller fish to their own kind. The ocean was ruled by giants, and Dunkleosteus was their king. But even in their dominance, the seeds of change were growing. Some fish, living in shallow and oxygen-poor waters, evolved lungs and stronger fins to move between pools. They could survive on land for short periods, gulping air and wriggling across mud. From these creatures came the first amphibians, pioneers of a new world. Tiktaalik, one of the most famous, had both gills and lungs, fins and wrists. When it pulled itself onto a muddy bank, it carried with it the future of all land-dwelling vertebrates. The transition from sea to land was slow and brutal. Those that ventured onto shore faced dehydration, gravity, and new predators. Yet some survived. In time, the descendants of these early explorers would evolve stronger limbs, lungs, and skin that resisted drying. They would spread across the continents, filling swamps and forests with new forms of life. By the Carboniferous period, around 350 million years ago, Earth had become a world of towering plants and enormous insects. The air was thick with oxygen, fueling creatures of impossible size. Dragonflies with wings wider than a man's arm glided through the air. Millipedes grew longer than cars, crawling through steaming jungles. Amphibians as large as crocodiles lounged in swamps, their golden eyes breaking the surface of still water. This was a world teeming with life, and yet it was as alien as the Cambrian oceans before it. The forests of the Carboniferous were like green cathedrals, their canopies blocking out much of the sunlight. The trunks of giant ferns and club mosses rose high, their bark patterned with strange ridges. The ground was covered in moss and decaying wood, feeding an endless cycle of growth. Everywhere there was sound, the drone of insects, the croak of amphibians, the hiss of rain falling through layers of leaves. But nature's experiments continued. As the world changed, so did its creatures. Some amphibians began to lay eggs that did not require water. Those eggs gave rise to the first reptiles, animals that could live fully on land. With them came a new kind of survival, faster, drier, more adaptable. The amphibian lords of the swamps began to fade, replaced by these new masters of the dry earth. The end of the Carboniferous and the beginning of the Permian brought another wave of transformation. The supercontinent Pangaea formed, joining nearly all land into one vast mass. The climate grew hotter and drier. The once lush jungles shrank, replaced by deserts and open plains. In this harsh new world, new creatures evolved to endure the heat. Among them were the synapsids, distant ancestors of mammals. They looked like reptiles but were more complex inside, with more efficient lungs and metabolism. One of the most famous, Dimetrodon, carried a great sail on its back, perhaps for regulating temperature. It was the dominant predator of its time, stalking the arid landscapes of the Permian. Around it lived other beings no less strange, horned herbivores with tusks, sprawling lizards with armored backs, and small, agile hunters darting between rocks. The earth of the Permian was harsh, its colors muted in reds and browns, its life clinging to scattered oases. But for all its difficulty, evolution continued to refine its designs, bringing creatures ever closer to the forms we recognize today. Then, catastrophe struck. Around 252 million years ago, volcanic eruptions in Siberia released enough gas and ash to poison the world. Temperatures soared, oceans acidified, and oxygen levels plunged. More than 90% of species vanished in what scientists call the Great Dying, the most devastating extinction in Earth's history. The seas emptied, the land fell silent, and the planet teetered on the edge of lifelessness. Yet even this apocalypse was not the end. A few survivors endured, adapting to the new, toxic world. From their descendants came the reptiles that would one day evolve into dinosaurs, crocodiles, and birds. Life had begun again, transformed yet again by disaster. Looking back, it is clear that before the dinosaurs ever roamed the earth, other empires had risen and fallen. The Cambrian seas, the Devonian reefs, the Carboniferous jungles, all were worlds unto themselves, filled with creatures that seemed too strange to have been real. But they were real. Their fossils lie beneath our feet, silent witnesses to ages of creation and destruction. These ancient beings remind us that Earth's history is not a straight line, but a series of experiments. Every extinction clears the stage for something new. Every survivor carries forward a piece of the past. The dragonfly that hovers today, the shark that swims the ocean, even the human hand all carry echoes of those alien ancestors. Before dinosaurs, Earth was already ancient. It had known empires of creatures so bizarre they seemed the work of another universe. But they were ours, part of the same grand story. They walked, swam, and crawled across a planet still learning what life could be. Their world is gone, but its traces remain in the stone, in the air, and in us. The creatures that ruled before the dinosaurs may look like they belong on another planet, but in truth they belong to the same one we call home.